As the narrator of this story, I'm humbled to share an unforgettable journey that began one ordinary morning. My wife, Laura, sat me down in the living room, her expression serious but not unkind. "I think it's time for us to part ways," she said, her voice trembling slightly. We had been married for 15 years, and though our life together hadn't been perfect, it had been built on respect, understanding, and shared dreams. Her words were a shock, piercing through the routine of our lives. "Why?" I asked softly, trying to keep the emotion from my voice. Her answer wasn't dramatic or scandalous. It was honest. "I've felt lost for a while now. I need to rediscover myself, and I don't know if I can do that here." Her admission hurt, but it also spoke volumes about her inner struggle. I loved Laura enough to want her happiness, even if it meant I might not be part of it. So I said the hardest words I'd ever spoken: "If that's what you need, I'll support you." Little did I know, her journey would lead to an unexpected cascade of events that would forever change both of our lives. After our conversation, Laura began packing her belongings. It was surreal watching her fold sweaters we'd bought together on vacations or pack books we'd debated over late at night. Our home, once warm and shared, now felt like a transition point, a station where one of us was boarding a train while the other remained behind. I didn't try to stop her. Instead, I focused on giving her the space she needed, even though my heart felt heavy. The day she left, I helped load her car. She hugged me before getting in, and for a moment, it felt like the Laura I knew was still there, the woman who laughed at my silly jokes and planned adventures with me. "I'll always be grateful for you," she said, tears welling in her eyes. I managed a nod. "Take care of yourself." As her car disappeared down the street, the silence in our house became almost deafening. I stood at the door for what felt like hours, unsure of what to do next. But life doesn't wait for you to catch your breath. Bills needed paying, work deadlines loomed, and friends started calling to check in. "Are you okay?" my best friend Mark asked during one of our calls. "I don't know," I admitted. But I let her go because it's what she wanted. I just hope she finds what she's looking for. Little did I know, Laura's journey to find herself would soon spiral into something neither of us could have anticipated. Weeks turned into months. Life without Laura was an adjustment. Quiet dinners, solitary weekends, and the hollow echo of her absence in every corner of the house. I stayed busy, hoping work and hobbies would fill the void. Then one evening I got an unexpected call. It was Laura. "Hi," she said hesitantly. "Hi," I replied, surprised but not unkind. "How are you?" Her voice was strained, almost fragile. I've been better. Can we talk?" We agreed to meet at a small cafe we used to frequent. She arrived looking worn, not physically but emotionally. The spark of confidence I'd seen when she left had dimmed, replaced by a shadow of uncertainty. "How's everything going?" I asked, trying to mask my concern. She hesitated before answering. "Not as I thought it would. I thought leaving would bring me clarity, but instead it's complicated." I didn't pry, though every part of me wanted to. She was clearly struggling, but Laura wasn't the type to open up easily. "It's okay to feel lost," I offered. "Sometimes the path forward isn't clear right away." She nodded but avoided eye contact. "Thanks." I just wanted to hear a familiar voice. We talked for a while longer, mostly small talk, before she left. But as I watched her walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she was letting on. Over the next few weeks, Laura's calls became more frequent. Sometimes they were brief, just to check in. Other times she lingered, sharing bits and pieces of her struggles. She mentioned difficulties adjusting, the loneliness of starting over, and the realization that finding herself wasn't as straightforward as she'd hoped. I listened, offering support when I could, but I also reminded myself to keep a boundary. After all, she'd chosen to leave. But as her calls grew more emotional, it became clear. Laura was in deeper trouble than she was letting on. It was a Saturday evening when I received Laura's most concerning call yet. Her voice was shaky, words spilling out faster than I could process. "I don't know what to do anymore," she said, her tone laced with desperation. "Everything's falling apart. I gripped the phone tightly. What's going on, Laura? Are you safe? There was a long pause. I made some bad decisions. Trusted the wrong people. It's a mess and I don't know how to fix it. This wasn't like her. Laura had always been the level-headed one, the planner who thought things through. Hearing her so unsteady made my chest tighten. Where are you? I asked, my voice firm but calm. She hesitated before giving me the address. It was a dingy apartment complex in a part of town I'd never known her to frequent. I'm coming over, I said, grabbing my keys before she could protest. When I arrived, I barely recognized the woman who answered the door. Her eyes were red, her usually immaculate hair disheveled, and the spark of life I once admired was completely absent. The apartment was small and cluttered, a stark contrast to the tidy home we'd shared. Papers were scattered across the table, and a stack of unopened bills sat in the corner. What happened, Laura? I asked gently, taking a seat across from her. She broke down, tears streaming as she recounted her struggle since leaving. The search for purpose had led her to take risks, financial ventures that went sour, acquaintances who turned out to be less than trustworthy. I thought I could handle it all, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But now I'm in over my head. I didn't know who else to call. Despite everything, hearing those words reminded me of the bond we once had. I wasn't angry or bitter, just deeply concerned. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. We'll figure this out. But first you need to let me help you. For the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Over the next few days, I helped Laura sort through the chaos that had engulfed her life. It was overwhelming at first. Overdue bills, legal notices, and a web of complications that seemed impossible to untangle. I didn't want you to see me like this, she admitted one evening as we sifted through documents at her kitchen table. This isn't about appearances, Laura, I said firmly. You called for help, and that's what matters. We'll get through this one step at a time. We started with the basics. I helped her contact creditors and negotiate repayment plans. Some were understanding, others less so, but at least we were making progress. Next, we tackled her job situation. Laura had left her stable position when she moved out, believing she needed a fresh start. Unfortunately, the new role she'd taken hadn't panned out, leaving her unemployed and struggling to make ends meet. I feel like such a failure, she confessed one night, her voice breaking. You're not a failure, I said, meeting her tear-filled eyes. You're someone who took a risk to find yourself. It didn't work out the way you hoped, but that doesn't mean you can't rebuild. Slowly but surely, we began to see glimmers of progress. Laura found a part-time job at a local bookstore, something small but steady. It wasn't the high-powered career she once had, but it was a start. As we worked through her challenges, something unexpected happened. We started talking like we used to. There was no blame, no anger. Just honest conversations about life, mistakes, and the lessons they teach us. One evening, as we shared a quiet dinner in her tiny apartment, Laura said something that stayed with me. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice soft. I don't deserve this after walking away from you. I shook my head. This isn't about deserving, Laura. It's about helping someone I care about. For the first time in months, she smiled. A genuine, heartfelt smile that reminded me of the woman I'd fallen in love with years ago. But as we celebrated small victories, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were still more challenges ahead. With each passing week, Laura regained more of her footing. The bookstore job brought her structure, and the financial mess was beginning to clear up. Still, I could tell she was carrying a weight she hadn't yet shared. One evening, as we sat quietly in her living room, she broke the silence. There's something I need to tell you, she began, her voice hesitant. Something I've been avoiding. I set my coffee down, bracing myself. Go ahead. I'm listening. Laura took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. When I left, I thought I was running toward something better. But what I didn't realize was that I was running away from myself. And from us. Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. I blamed you for things that weren't your fault, she continued. I told myself that leaving would fix everything, But all it did was show me how much I'd taken for granted. I stayed silent, letting her speak. I was too proud to admit that I'd made mistakes. Even when things started falling apart, I kept telling myself I had to fix it on my own. That's why I didn't call you sooner. I didn't think I had the right to ask for your help. Her honesty was raw, and it stirred a mix of emotions within me. There was pain, yes, but also a deep sense of understanding. We both made mistakes, I said finally. And while I can't say it didn't hurt, I'm glad you trusted me enough to call when you needed help. That takes courage, Laura. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for how I left things. You don't have to figure that out right now, I said gently. What matters is what you do next. That conversation marked a turning point. For the first time since she'd left, Laura seemed lighter, as though finally facing her past had lifted a burden she'd been carrying for months. But as much as it felt like we were closing one chapter, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the start of another. Months had passed since Laura's life unraveled, and in that time she had made incredible strides. She moved to a smaller, cozier apartment, took on more hours at the bookstore, and even started volunteering at a local shelter, a cause she'd always been passionate about but never had time for before. Though we had grown closer during her recovery, I was careful to maintain boundaries. I didn't want to confuse helping her with rekindling what we'd lost. But one evening, as we sat on a park bench after dinner, Laura brought up the unspoken question. Do you think we'll ever find our way back to each other? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. I took a moment before answering, choosing my words carefully. I think we both needed to grow in ways we couldn't while we were together. And while I'll always care about you, I don't know if we can, or should, go back to what we were. She nodded, looking down at her hands. I understand. But I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. You didn't have to, but you did, and it means more than I can say. There's nothing to forgive, Laura, I said, smiling gently. Life isn't about getting everything right. It's about learning and moving forward. Our conversation ended on a peaceful note, the kind that doesn't need big promises or dramatic resolutions. It was a moment of acceptance, of the people we'd been, the mistakes we'd made, and the potential for a better future, whether together or apart. In the weeks that followed, Laura and I settled into a new rhythm. We weren't quite friends, but we weren't strangers either. We supported each other in small ways. A text on a hard day, a quick coffee when time allowed. And though we both knew our paths might not cross forever, there was a quiet understanding that we had made each other stronger. Laura once said that leaving was the hardest decision she'd ever made. But I believe what truly defined her was the courage it took to face the chaos, rebuild her life, and find her way back to herself. As for me, I learned that letting go isn't the end. It's the beginning of a journey toward something new.